My name is Nora Vance. I am 36 years old. I am standing in the hallway outside Suite 214 of the Kellerman Medical Arts Building on 4th Avenue in Seattle, holding a cup of coffee that has gone completely cold, listening to my mother tell 11 of her friends that I borrowed this clinic for the afternoon to make myself look important. She doesn't know I'm in the hallway. She thinks I stepped out to take a call. I can hear her through the door. The warmth in her voice, the little laugh she uses when she's performing for an audience, the way she drops her volume just enough so that anyone nearby feels like they're being let in on something private. I mean, she's renting the space, obviously, she says. You know how Nora is. She always loved the presentation side of things. I have been the medical director of Pacific Coast Integrative Health for 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. The clinic has 6 full-time physicians on staff, a roster of 1,847 active patients, and a billing operation that processed $2.3 million in revenue last fiscal year. My name is on the operating license. My signature is on every staff contract. The building lease is in my LLC's name. I set the coffee cup down on the windowsill and looked at the gray November sky over Elliott Bay. I want to tell you how we got here, because it did not start in this hallway. It started on a Tuesday afternoon, 12 years ago, when my mother stood in the kitchen of our house in Marin County and told my sister Brooke, in front of me, that Brooke was the one who would do something with her life. I was 24 years old. I had just been accepted to the University of Washington School of Medicine. My mother was helping Brooke plan the grand opening of her first wellness studio. Before I tell you what my mother found out that afternoon, tell me something. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it where you are? I want to know how far this story travels, because the people it reaches always seem to be the ones who understand it already. My mother's name is Diane. She is 61 years old, and she is the kind of woman who makes you feel, within 30 seconds of meeting her, that she is genuinely delighted by you. She asks about your children by name. She remembers what you ordered last time you had lunch together. She sends birthday cards, handwritten, never printed, and she means every word in them. She also has a gift for saying devastating things in a tone of voice that makes them sound like care. I was not a difficult child. I was the one who got good grades quietly, who didn't ask for attention, who kept my head down and worked. My sister Brooke was the one who had the friends, the energy, the ideas that filled up a room. Brooke was 4 years older than me, and she was, by any fair measure, magnetic. I understood why people were drawn to her. I was sometimes drawn to her myself. What I didn't understand, until I was old enough to name it, was the way my mother used that magnetism as a measuring stick. Brooke would have handled that differently, she said once, when I came home from a school presentation with a second-place ribbon instead of first. I was 15. I hadn't known Brooke had entered the same competition. I hadn't known there was a comparison available. After that, I started noticing how often the sentence appeared in different forms. Brooke always knew how to read a room. Your sister would have said something, you know how she is. I just think Brooke has a way of connecting with people that not everyone has, and that's okay. That last one came when I told my mother I'd decided to pursue medicine. That's wonderful, she said. I want you to be realistic, Nora. It's an incredibly social field. You have to connect with people in a very specific way. Brooke has that. You're more of a behind-the-scenes person. And that's a real gift too. I was 22 years old. I had a 3.89 GPA and a research fellowship in integrative oncology. I said nothing. I went back to my apartment, and I studied for 4 more hours. The comparison did not stop when I left home. It followed me across state lines and through every milestone I didn't announce. When I matched into my residency program at Swedish Medical Center, one of the most competitive programs in the Pacific Northwest, my mother called to tell me Brooke had been featured in a Marin lifestyle magazine. The full spread, she said. The photographers spent 2 days in the studio. When I completed my fellowship, my father, who was a quieter version of the same mechanism, an enabler more than a driver, sent me a card that said, "We're proud of all you've accomplished," and included a newspaper clipping about Brooke's first spa opening. No note, just the clipping, folded neatly into the envelope alongside the card. I kept the card. I did not keep the clipping. The thing about being compared, repeatedly, across years, is that you learn something the person doing the comparing never intended to teach you. You learn what they value, and what they don't. You learn what is legible to them and what isn't. And once you understand that, you stop trying to be legible to them. You stop curating your news for their consumption. You make your decisions in the spaces between their visits, and you let the results speak later, when there is no way to interrupt them. That is not bitterness. That is efficiency. I built my practice in the spaces between visits. I built it in the early mornings before my first patients arrived, in the late evenings after my last ones left, in the conference rooms of banks and the offices of attorneys and the phone calls with licensing boards where my name, Nora Vance, Medical Director, Pacific Coast Integrative Health, was the name that moved things forward. Nobody in my family knew the name of my bank. Nobody in my family had ever met Priya, or my associate physicians, or any one of the 1,847 patients who drove to the Kellerman Building because they trusted the practice I had built. That was my choice. I had made it with both eyes open. What I had not anticipated, what I should have, but didn't, was that the worlds would eventually find each other on their own. Medical school was 4 years. Residency was 3. I built my clinical hours in family medicine and then completed a 2-year fellowship in integrative and functional medicine at a program in Portland. I moved to Seattle at 30 because the Pacific Northwest had the patient population I wanted to work with, educated, health-forward, increasingly interested in root cause medicine over symptom management. I opened Pacific Coast Integrative Health in a 2-room suite with 1 nurse practitioner and a part-time administrator. Within 18 months, we had outgrown the space. I brought in 2 associate physicians. I negotiated our current lease on the 4th floor of the Kellerman Building, 4,200 square feet, 7 exam rooms, a procedure suite, and a conference room I used for patient education seminars. I did not tell my family how large the practice had gotten. This was not an accident. It was a decision I made carefully over time, after years of small experiments in sharing news and watching what happened to it. When I passed my boards, "That's so great, Nora, Brooke actually looked into a nutrition certification program, can you believe it?" When I opened the clinic, "Oh, that's exciting. Is that like a spa thing?" Brooke's looking at a similar concept. When I told my mother the clinic had crossed $1 million in annual revenue, silence for 4 seconds, then, "You know Brooke's investors are very interested in her expansion. She's been meeting with some really serious people." I stopped offering updates. I answered questions when asked. I kept the size and shape of what I'd built inside the walls of the Kellerman Building, where it belonged to me, quietly and completely, without requiring anyone's opinion of it. Brooke's business was called Meridian Wellness Group. It had started as a single luxury spa in Sausalito and had expanded to 3 locations, Sausalito, Mill Valley, and a new one she was opening in the Marin Civic Center district. My mother had invested the first $178,000. Several of Brooke's friends had invested smaller amounts. There was a primary institutional investor my mother referred to only as the fund, a Seattle-based private equity vehicle she mentioned often, always in a tone that communicated she didn't entirely understand it, but understood it was significant. I knew which fund. I had known for 8 months. The fund was Cascade Medical Growth Partners. It was a health and wellness-focused investment vehicle that I had been introduced to through my hospital network and with which I had a consulting relationship that had grown quietly over the past 2 years. I was one of 4 physician advisors. My role was to evaluate clinical operations for potential portfolio companies, to assess whether their medical and wellness programming was evidence-based, scalable, and compliant with applicable health regulations. Meridian Wellness Group had come across my desk 14 months ago. I had reviewed their operational model, their service offerings, their licensing documentation, and their safety protocols for the medical-adjacent services they offered, for vitamin infusions, peptide consultations, NAD plus therapy. I had flagged 7 compliance concerns. 3 were significant. I had filed my assessment in the fund's internal review system and recused myself from the subsequent decision, citing a family relationship with the operator I had failed to disclose at intake. The fund had proceeded with the investment anyway, noting my concerns in the file. They were still, as of last month, the primary institutional backer of Meridian Wellness Group, the one my mother called the fund, carrying a position of $520,000 across Brooke's 3 locations. I did not tell my mother any of this. What I did instead was say yes when she called in October and asked if she and a group of her friends could come to Seattle for a long weekend. "I want to show them where you live," she said. "And Nora, could we see your clinic? Brooke's been talking about possibly opening something up there, and I'd love to see the space." I said yes. I booked the conference room, arranged for light catering, and told my front desk coordinator, Priya, that I was having a family visit on the afternoon of the 14th. Priya had been with me for 3 years. She knew my family's history and the way people who work closely with you eventually know everything, not because you've told them, but because the absence of certain conversations tells its own story. "How many people?" she asked. 11 or 12. She looked at me for a moment. "Do you want me to brief you on anything before they arrive?" "No," I said. "Just make sure the director's name placard is on my door." She understood. They arrived at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday, the last day of the fiscal quarter. My mother led them through the lobby, like she was giving a tour of a property she was considering purchasing. I watched from the reception area as they came through the glass doors, 12 women in their late 50s and early 60s, dressed for a Saturday lunch rather than a medical office. My mother saw me and opened her arms. "Nora," she said, and hugged me the way she always hugged me, warmly, completely, with her full attention, so that for 3 or 4 seconds I remembered every version of her that had ever been kind to me. "Mom," I said. "This is beautiful," she said, looking around the reception area. The clean lines, the Douglas fir reception desk, the framed botanical prints, the sound of the water feature Priya had insisted we install in year 2. "Is this the whole floor?" "We have 7 exam rooms, a procedure suite, and the conference room where we're set up for you." "A procedure suite," she repeated, smiling at her friends. "Very fancy." "It's where we do for infusions and minor procedures," I said. "Like a spa thing," one of the friends said. "More clinical," I said. I kept my face still. I led them down the main corridor toward the conference room. We passed my office. The door was open. The placard on the door read, "Dr. Nora Vance, Medical Director." My mother stopped. She read it. Then she read it again, the way you read something when your brain hasn't caught up to what your eyes are telling it. "Medical Director," she said, in a tone I recognized, the warm dismissal register, slightly elevated. "That sounds very official." "It is official," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked at her friends. Then she laughed, the small, social laugh. The one that says I am not being cruel, I am being charming. "You know, Nora has always loved a title," she said. And she walked past the door. I said nothing. I reached for the door handle and pulled it shut behind her. The conference room had been arranged with coffee, sparkling water, and a tray of sandwiches from the cafe downstairs. I had not arranged a formal presentation. My mother was under the impression this was a casual tour, an opportunity for her friends to see where her younger daughter worked, perhaps to gather ideas for Brooke's hypothetical Seattle expansion. I sat at the end of the table. My mother sat at the other end, which I had expected. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation moved the way it always moved: Brooke's new location, the investor dinner she'd attended in San Francisco, the interior designer she'd hired, the influencer who'd posted about the Mill Valley Spa and brought in 300 new bookings. My mother narrated all of it with the fluency of someone who has rehearsed a presentation. I listened. I refilled my water glass. I said nothing. Then one of the friends, her name was Sandra, she had a warmth about her that my mother's friends often had, looked at me and said, "Nora, how long have you been in this space?" "4 years in this suite," I said. "The practice is 6 years old." "And, do you own the practice?" "I do. My LLC holds the operating entity and the lease." Sandra nodded. She looked impressed in the careful way that people look impressed when they want to ask a follow-up question but aren't sure if it's polite. My mother spoke before she could. "Did you borrow this place for the photos?" she said, smiling. "That's what I keep thinking. It looks like you borrowed it for the afternoon to make it look official." She glanced at the medical director placard visible through the conference room window. "The sign is a lovely touch." The room went quiet for one beat, the beat that happens when 11 people simultaneously process, whether they just heard what they think they heard. I looked at my mother. "The sign has been on my door for 4 years," I said. I am the medical director because I own the practice and hold the clinical license. There are 6 physicians on staff. We have 1,847 active patients. Last year we did $2.3 million in revenue. The numbers landed the way specific numbers always do, not as boasts but as facts. Sandra's expression changed. So did 3 others. My mother tilted her head. The smile stayed. The warmth stayed. But something behind her eyes shifted, a small recalibration, the kind that happens when a story you have been telling for a long time suddenly requires a revision. Well, she said. That's wonderful, Nora. I nodded once. Then I looked at the conference room windows. The visit lasted another 40 minutes. My mother spent most of it circling back to Brooke, the expansion plans, the investor interest, the idea that Seattle was exactly the market Brooke's been looking at. 2 or 3 times she used the phrase learning from Nora's model in a way that positioned my 6-year-old $2.3 revenue practice as a useful case study for her other daughter's hypothetical future project. I answered every question that was asked of me. I kept my voice level. I showed them the procedure suite when someone asked to see it. I let Priya walk them through the front desk operation because Priya is extraordinary at explaining things to people who have no context for what they're looking at. Sandra asked me 3 more questions before they left, substantive ones, about patient acquisition, about the clinical model, about how I had built the physician team. She asked them the way someone asks when they are genuinely curious, not when they are performing interest. I answered each one. I noticed my mother going quiet during Sandra's questions. Not a hostile quiet, a recalibrating one. The quiet of someone watching a scene that doesn't fit the story they came in with. One of the other friends, her name was Patricia, she had driven up from Portland for the weekend, said, before they stood to leave, "You must be very proud of what you've built here." She said it to me directly, looking at me. "I am," I said. That was all. My mother looked at her coffee cup when I said it. At the end, standing in the lobby, my mother hugged me again. "I'm so proud of you," she said, into my shoulder. And I believed she meant it, in the limited way she was capable of meaning it. I wish Brooke could see this. She gets so many ideas. I noted, without saying anything, that this was the 4th time in a 90-minute visit she had used Brooke's name in a sentence about my clinic. I noted it the way I noted everything, quietly, specifically, without editorializing. "Safe travels," I said. "Oh, we're not flying until tomorrow morning. We're doing dinner in Belltown." "Enjoy your flight," I said. She pulled back and looked at me, a brief look, measuring something. The warmth was there. It was always there. But there was something else behind it today, something that had been sitting there since the moment she read the placard on my door and left, and that had gotten quieter and quieter across the 90 minutes as the real shape of the room became impossible to ignore. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded. She let her friends through the glass doors. I stood at the reception desk and watched them go, 12 women walking through the lobby of the Kellerman Building on 4th Avenue in Seattle, my mother at the front, moving with the assurance of someone who had not quite finished processing what she had seen. Then I walked back to my office, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up my email. Cascade Medical Growth Partners had a CFO named Leonard Okafor. He was the operational head of the fund, the person who managed portfolio relationships, and the person with whom I had filed my original compliance review on Meridian Wellness Group 14 months ago. I had not followed up on that review. I had recused myself and moved on because I had decided, consciously and with some effort, that my professional relationship with the fund and my personal relationship with my family did not need to intersect. That had been the right decision at the time. I typed for 6 minutes. The email was formal. It referenced my prior compliance review and the 7 flags I had noted, 3 of which were significant. It stated that since my review, I had become aware that Meridian Wellness Group had continued to expand medical-adjacent services, without resolving the underlying licensing and protocol deficiencies I had documented. It stated that I was formally recommending the fund request an updated operational audit before the next funding tranche. It stated that pending that audit, I was recommending a hold on any additional capital deployment to Meridian Wellness Group. In the last paragraph, I noted that I was disclosing a personal relationship with the operator, Brooke Vance, my sister, and that this disclosure should be noted in the file alongside my prior recusal. I read it once. Then I added one line to the subject. Meridian Wellness Group. Compliance concerns update. Recommend hold. I attached my original 14-month-old review. I pressed send at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon, the last day of the fiscal quarter. Then I sat back and looked at the framed permit approval letter on the wall beside my bookshelf, the one from year one, when the state licensing board had approved Pacific Coast Integrative Health for clinical operations. I had framed it not because it was beautiful, but because it was real, because it had existed quietly on that wall through every version of the story, requiring nothing from anyone. Priya knocked twice and opened the door. They gone? They're gone. She came in and sat in the chair across from my desk, the chair my patients used, the chair my staff used when something needed to be said plainly. She called it a borrowed space, Priya said. It wasn't a question. I heard you in the hallway, she said, when I didn't answer. The door was cracked. Yes, I said. Priya was quiet for a moment. She had worked with me for 3 years. She had watched me build this practice from a 2-room suite. She had watched me negotiate the lease on this floor, hire 6 physicians, build a patient base of nearly 2,000 people. She had watched me do all of it without once asking my family to acknowledge it. You know what I've never understood, she said. People who need you to be small do not recover well from finding out you weren't. I looked at her. That's very good, I said. I've been workshopping it, she said. She stood up. Go home. It's the end of the quarter, and you've had enough today. I stayed another hour. Then I went home. Leonard Okafor called me on a Monday morning, just before 9, the kind of Monday where everything that happens feels permanent. He had read my email over the weekend. He had pulled my original review. He had asked his compliance team to do a preliminary check on Meridian Wellness Group's current operational status. What they found was worse than what I had flagged 14 months ago. The 3 significant compliance concerns I had identified: unlicensed medical oversight of IV therapy protocols, inadequate adverse event documentation, and a scope of practice issue with the peptide consultation service, had not been resolved. They had expanded. Meridian Wellness Group had added 2 more medical-adjacent service categories at the Mill Valley and Marin Civic Center locations without updating their medical oversight agreements. More significantly, the physician whose name appeared on Meridian's medical director agreement, the one that made their clinical services legally permissible, had not been physically present at any of the 3 locations in the prior 4 months. Leonard's team had pulled scheduling records. The physician was a hospitalist in Sacramento with no documented connection to Meridian's day-to-day operations. This was not a minor administrative gap. This was a liability event. Leonard told me all of this in the measured, careful language of someone who is already thinking about the next 12 steps. We're going to request an immediate operational audit, he said. And we're putting the next tranche on hold. All funding tied to Meridian Wellness Group is suspended pending resolution. I understand, I said. Nora, he said. You flagged this 14 months ago. I recused myself, I said. You flagged it, he said again. I said nothing. I looked out the window at Elliott Bay, gray and flat in the November light. Thank you for the follow-up, he said. And he ended the call. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment. On the wall beside my bookshelf, the framed permit approval letter from the state licensing board was exactly where it had always been. I had hung it there in year one, in a frame I had bought at a hardware store on Aurora Avenue for $11, and I had never moved it. In the 6 years since, I had added a board certification plaque and a photo of my staff from the clinic's 3rd anniversary, but the permit letter was still in the same spot, in the same $11 frame, and it was the first thing I saw every morning when I sat down at my desk. The Cascade Medical Growth Partners hold on Meridian Wellness Group was announced internally to Brooks Investor Group within 48 hours. I knew this not because anyone called me, but because 2 days after my call with Leonard, my phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother in a single afternoon, no voicemails, which told me more than a voicemail would have. The silence between calls is the real message. 3 calls in one afternoon with no message means the person on the other end is deciding, in real time, what they want to say. She waited 4 more days to call when she knew I would answer. My mother called me 4 days later. She did not open with a greeting. She said my name, Nora, in the voice she used when she was managing something. "I've been talking to Brooke," she said. "Her investors have put everything on hold. The fund, the Seattle one, they've pulled back. Brooke is saying it could jeopardize the Marin location." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. A pause. "Do you know anything about this?" she asked. "You said you had connections in that world." I thought about the question carefully. I thought about what it would cost me to answer it honestly, and what it would cost me to say nothing.
"Mom," I said.
"Brooke's practice has been operating medical services without adequate licensed physician oversight. That's not a paperwork issue. That's a patient safety issue. If an investor discovered that, suspending funding would be the correct response." Silence.
"She didn't know," my mother said.
"The business side of it is complicated and she signed a medical director agreement," I said. "She knew there was a compliance framework in place. Whether or not she understood all of it, she was responsible for it." More silence. Longer. "Did you have something to do with this?" my mother asked. The warmth was gone. The register was different now, flat, careful, the voice of someone who is putting something together in real time. "I disclosed a concern through my professional network," I said. "Based on a review I did 14 months ago that I disclosed to Brooks investors at the time. I had flagged it and recused myself. Last week I followed up. A sound on the other end. Not a word. Something smaller."
"You followed up," she said.
"Yes. After she was here. After we visited." "Yes." I heard her breathing. I heard the particular quality of her silence. Not the performance kind, not the managing kind. The real kind. The kind where someone is standing in a room they thought they understood, and realizing the walls are in different places than they thought. "She could lose the Marin location," my mother said. "Quieter now. If her operations aren't brought into compliance, it won't be the investors who close her," I said. "It'll be the licensing board. The investors pulling back is the version where she has time to fix things." The silence went a long time. "I didn't know you were involved with that fund," she said. "You never asked what I did," I said. "You asked how my clinic was, and then you told me what Brooke was doing." I said it without anger. That was the thing that surprised me. Later, there was no anger in it by then. There was only the plain fact of what had been true for 12 years, stated in a room where it could finally be heard. "I said that thing," my mother said, "in your conference room, about the borrowed space." "Yes. I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," I said. "And I know you believe you didn't mean any harm by it. That's the part I've spent a long time understanding." Another silence. Different from the others. "I'm going to let you go," I said. "Tell Brooke to get a real medical director, on-site and documented, before the audit. That's the first thing she needs to do. If she does it fast enough, the fund may continue." I said it because it was true, and because it was the most useful thing I could offer in that moment. "Okay," my mother said, very quietly. "Take care of yourself," I said. And I ended the call. Brooke hired a clinical operations consultant within the week. She brought in a licensed physician as medical director, documented and contracted properly, within 3. The operational audit came back with findings, but manageable findings, the kind that could be corrected with a compliance plan and a supervision structure. Leonard's fund lifted the hold 6 weeks later. The Marin Civic Center location opened on schedule. My mother did not call me to tell me any of this. I found out from Leonard, who mentioned it in passing at an advisory meeting. My mother called me 6 weeks after the Marin opening. She called on a Sunday morning, and she didn't open with the warm voice or the managing voice. She opened with silence, and then, "Can I take you to dinner next time I'm in Seattle?" "Yes," I said. "I want to talk," she said. "Not about Brooke. About, I don't know. About things I probably should have said differently." I didn't tell her it was okay. I didn't tell her not to worry about it. I said, "I'd like that." And I meant it, in the same limited, honest way that she had always meant the things she said to me, imperfectly, genuinely, with more complicated love behind it than either of us had ever quite known how to handle. "I want to tell you something. Setting a limit is not an attack. It is information. When you stop performing smallness for the people who needed you small, when you let the real size of what you have built stand visible without apology or explanation, you're not being cruel to them. You are simply telling the truth about who you are. That is not something you owe anyone an apology for. You can love the people who dismissed you and still refuse to collapse back into the version of yourself they needed you to be. Love and being used are not the same transaction, even when they have been treated that way your entire life. Learning the difference is not a betrayal. It is a correction. The people who chose to see you before any of it was proven, the Priya in your life, whoever that person is, they are more your family than the ones who share your blood and measure you against the wrong thing. Biology is a fact. Belonging is a choice. Choose accordingly. Walking away from a room that was never built to hold who you actually are is not bitterness. It is not giving up. It is the only rational response to a space that has always been too small. You cannot grow in a room that was designed around a smaller version of you. And the quiet, the mornings where no one is ranking you, comparing you, deciding what you're worth, that silence is not emptiness. That is what it was supposed to feel like all along. You spent a long time thinking peace was an absence. It isn't. It is a place. And it is one you are allowed to live in. Priya was right about one thing. People who need you to be small do not recover well from finding out you weren't. My mother built her picture of me on a version that stopped being accurate a long time ago. And what I know now, in a way I didn't know it for most of my 30s, is that her picture was never the real thing. The real thing was always in the Kellerman building on the 4th floor with 6 physicians and 1,847 patients, and a medical director placard on the door that had been there for 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. Waiting for no one. Tell me honestly, if you had been sitting at that conference table when she said it, would you have smiled and said nothing? Or would you have shown them sooner? The story you just heard was inspired by real experiences shared on public platforms including Reddit and other online communities. It has been thoughtfully adapted and reimagined for storytelling purposes. All characters, situations, names, and settings are fictional, altered, or generated using AI tools. Any resemblance to real individuals or events is entirely coincidental and unintentional. This story was created to deliver positive messages, emotional insight, and meaningful reflection, not to represent or defame any real person or situation. **